Alrighty, guys, welcome back. This one's kind of a fun one. I wanted to go over one of the reasons why NASA pays participants, you can look this up, about $20,000 to stay in bed for 70 days, which is crazy, right? Because they're kind of trying to stimulate weightlessness, right? Less gravity, inactivity. By having participants lay in bed to basically take a look at, hey, are astronauts at certain, do they have a higher risk at developing certain diseases out in space? So I think this one's really cool because it ties into something called Wolff's Law. We're going to talk about bone density, okay? So Wolff's Law kind of makes sense. It's pretty straightforward, but it basically says bone density is proportional to the force exerted on a bone. Okay? The force or stress that you put under your skeletal system. Okay? So, what are some positive stressors that are good for your bones, right? And you hear this all the time. I mean, there's obviously endocrine, there's hormonal issues, alcohol, smoking, stuff like that, just getting older, that can decrease your bone density. But good things that we can do is, activity. Okay, so activity, weights, and the big one, gravity. Just being upright, moving around, stuff like that. That's going to increase and stress your bones, which is going to increase your bone density. Okay, so this makes sense. Now let's go over here and talk about really one of the big reasons that NASA did this study, though, is it actually turns out, and the reason I put an image of kind of a broken bone here is what we're going to talk about is this actually decreases in space, right? Because gravity is diminished or non-existent, right? You decrease gravity. Well, one of the consequences is you're going to have a lower bone density. And to kind of illustrate that, there's two cell types that are kind of in equilibrium with each other, osteoblasts and osteoclasts. These are responsible for osteoblasts build your bone. Okay? And I remember that because there's a B for blast. And a blast is can also be something that turns into something in physiology. So osteoblasts build your bone. Osteoclasts destroy. Not destroy, but they break it down, right? They break down your bone. They literally decrease your bone density, right? And I remember that it has a C for catacombs. Catabolism is another word for breaking down something, right? In terms of metabolism. So catacomb, C, they break down, okay? So what's going to happen here is, and then I'll tie it into kidney stones, is one of the things that they found in these studies when participants were just laying in bed, well, one thing is it stimulates less gravity and less activity, right? So they did notice a decreased bone density. What really happened here is your osteoclasts were actually upregulated, their activity, and the osteoblasts that build your bone were downregulated. What is the net effect of that? Well, coming over here, you're going to have a decreased bone density. And this makes sense, right? You basically have a lot of something called resorption. And this ties into the kidney stones. Resorption is basically when the inorganic component of your bones is hydroxyapatite, which is basically calcium phosphate. The organic is collagen, which is a protein. Resorption occurs when osteoclasts are overactive. And what that does is the calcium that's in your bones gets basically pulled out, and resorption occurs in your blood. Okay, so you increase serum calcium in your blood. What is the consequence of this? Well, too much of this that's unregulated goes over here to your kidneys. Your kidneys are awesome. I mean, I always wonder what's my favorite organ. Kidneys are always up there. They're in the top 5 every time I think about it. Your kidneys are responsible for regulating the minerals in your blood, right? Well, one of the things that happens is your kidneys excrete a lot of calcium. They've noticed a lot of these participants, and it's been noted in astronauts as well. Well, what happens is the calcium is in your urine, because remember, you have so much of it in the blood because a lot of it's getting leached out of your bones, and it can't be regulated as well. Well, one of the consequences, calcium in your urine can form a calcium oxalate, and I might be spelling that wrong, stone, right? This is a precipitate, and then you have to pass, and it's very painful, right? Well, what I wanted to really show you here is that Wolff's law is basically saying bone density is proportional to strength, stress, force, right? In this case, it's gravity. Well, NASA wants to understand, hey, can we stimulate on Earth what decreased gravity would be and check some of the consequences of this? Well, one thing they did notice is that a lot of these participants had elevated blood calcium levels and brittle bones due to these osteoclasts that were upregulated, because your body doesn't need them in the bone. You don't need the calcium in the bone because it's not even under any stress. So it's going to go to other tissues to be used metabolically. One of the consequences was over at the kidneys due to increased calcium in the blood. A lot of it got excreted and formed a stone with oxalate, which is negative charge. And it's a negative charge, and that's a positive charge. So they kind of come together. They precipitate, form a painful stone that has to be passed. So it's kind of just a good illustration of just like, well, there's a reason they pay people $20,000 to sit in bed for 70 days. It's not fun. And yeah, your bone density suffers. So on that note, guys, have a great time on quarantine. I'm going to go walk the dog here after a couple essays, and I hope you like this video. We'll talk to you later. Peace.